So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen. And then, as I said, I'll go ahead back and forth, but I want to make sure that you get a chance to see everything that we're working with and then just give you some time also to explore as well. Awesome. So I see that some of you are already in, so we are good. So the big thing is, again, I do have the QR code as well, but obviously right now the most important thing is I already shared the link with you. So we have where we need to get started, and just a very, very quick intro because I do want to spend time on where we're headed together. I do work in the Muhlenberg School District in Pennsylvania. I was a teacher for 25 years, and I have been an instructional tech coach since the last couple of years. So it's been some time in fifth grade and ELA and social studies, but then also getting the opportunity to work K to 12. Information later about connecting would be awesome. So we can go ahead and check that out. Just some reminders about some things that we already know that are true. So if we're talking about those digital divides in education, we are thinking about use, always thinking about access and design. So what you'll find in the middle that you can go ahead and check out later on is basically what can you do based on the kind of divide that you're finding in the arena that you're working with, and a lot of extra things that are going to give you actionable steps. What can you do specifically for that one area? But it also has suggestions for all three. So please keep those in mind. And as I am sharing my screen, I might not be able to see the chat right away. So I'll make sure to get in and out of that. So I apologize if I don't answer you immediately. You are more than welcome to come off of mute and just go ahead and share something when you feel the need. So when we think about ISTE and ASCD, they're also getting the opportunity to really acknowledge we're not looking at one aspect of our students, or really even our teachers as well, but we're really focusing more on that part called nurture when we're talking about transformational learning principles. Thinking about those ways we're ensuring equity, as we just talked about that digital divide, connecting learning, but also cultivating belonging. If we don't feel that we belong, we tune out immediately. That's true of kids and adults. So we really need to think back to the keynote from this morning, thinking about those ways of those disengaged teens. What are some different ways, no matter what age we're working with, that we can go ahead and work together? So one of the places I'm going to share, and then I'll stop sharing my screen to see if there's any questions before we move on. But it's really important, no matter what we're prompting or no matter what we're working with, you're going to be picking a social emotional learning foundational resource that is applicable to where you are and what your audience needs. So it could be the Castle framework, where there is a hyperlink here. You would just go ahead and get that PDF, and then that could actually ground your searches in any of the large language models to really make sure it goes back to that framework, to always make sure that you're honoring that psychological safety. You could be working with the adverse childhood experiences instead, that framework, or you could be working with trauma-informed practices. These truly are just three possible frameworks. You could be picking others as well, but this is a good place that we want to make sure that we get the opportunity to share those ideas. So when we go ahead and work with this, I am going to show you something, and then I'll go ahead and stop sharing so we can talk for a second. I have an example of using one of the prompts that I'll show you where to find these in the idea of working with journal prompts. So if I want to use really the idea of AI as my teammate, I'm still making sure that I am the human in the loop. I am their teacher. I'm really building that responsibility and trust that they're going to be able to count on me. But I do need to have that teammate that's going to help me come up with those journal reflection prompts. And in this particular case, this is all about reflecting on understanding their emotions. This would be the first output, and then I would continue to iterate based on what I need. So if I see that emotions detective kit is something that I'd like to work further with, I'm going to keep on having that conversation to fine tune it to my students. So that's one example. Another is when it's embedded and integrated in our content areas. So in ChatGPT, just so I'm using a different large language model, this is going to be where I'm going to marry the opportunity to work with social emotional learning and also geometry. When I work with those two together, this time I'm going to be focusing on 8th grade and thinking about that idea of persistence. Our students have a hard time giving up easily on something. So this is a place where I feel that that could be a help in having that teammate. Notice I've got a math and an SEL objective. And then it's going to have that activation, the warm up, and obviously going through to work with the proofs. Same idea again. This is going to divide up the work, but it's also going to give me some background on how I can honor students, especially if that's not an area they feel comfortable in. So I don't want them to feel that they don't have that even playing field in terms of their social emotional needs. One more I'm going to show you here before we take a break and talk about some questions. This is a place in Gemini where I'm focusing on building empathy. Again, I'm going to be really grounding this in the castle framework, and I'm going to be thinking about that idea. This truly could be with any age, but I would iterate based on what I'm going to choose. Here's where it really is going to be important. Think about a time when you misunderstood somebody's intentions or feelings. And immediately I understand that this might be a place that as adults we get it, but as students they might not. So I'm going to continue working with other ideas in a second, but I am going to stop sharing for just a minute to see what kinds of questions, if any, that you have about what we've talked about so far. Okay. And I'll go ahead and start my video again, making sure. So, if there are any questions about what we're working on or the different pieces that are there, do you have any questions before we move on to the next part? Okay, and it should have my camera so I can go ahead and work with that.
I don't see you, Samantha, but that's okay.
No, I'm not seeing it right now either. When I went in and out of the browser, it did say there was an issue with that. But can everybody still hear me? Could you let me know in the chat if you can still hear me before I start?
We can hear you good, yeah.
We're good? Okay, thank you. So the thing that we just talked about, and again, if you go back to slide 5, anytime you're working with these ideas and you decide on that SEL framework that's going to ground those conversations, that's pretty much where this first part went and what we're working with. So just to kind of keep that in mind as our starting point. The next places will be some reminders, some places where you can sit with your thoughts, sit with others, really have conversations about what you feel you need to use to kind of ground the places you're going to be going. And then we'll have some places where you can actually explore, investigate, and get that opportunity to really do something that is completely yours, not something I'm sharing, but how is this going to address what you need? So when I share my screen this time, we're going to go ahead back in and now we're going to be, if you are following along, we are going to be going on in just a second to slide 7. I'm actually going to go ahead and skip 6 just in the interest of time. All right, and making sure. So, one of the things that we want to keep in mind, obviously, is that idea of obviously we have opportunities with AI in education, but there are those limitations. These are reminders to everybody that's here that's already aware of these things, but there's a great video, very short one. If you are having a problem describing bias to somebody, or you're not quite sure how that would sit with them later on so they could really understand why we need to be ethical and making sure we're responsible and effective, this is a really, really great video you can show. Again, 3 to 5 minutes at the most, but definitely something to check out later on. So this is a place where we do want to sit for a second. We are not going to take away something that is productive struggle. We need to make sure that we as adults, as well as students, get that opportunity to have some friction in what we're working on. We want to enhance the lift, but we have to make sure that what we're working on is not a barrier. So we're trying to remove those barriers. An example of that is, again, when we think about things that are counterproductive, if we're not providing enough support or an even playing field, those are not places that we want to die on that hill and say that that student's just got to figure it out. We need to support and make sure those SEL pieces are in our instructional plan so that we are honoring wherever they are, whatever their starting point is. The fact that they have a lack of background knowledge is not something, again, where we say, well, just try your best, just figure it out. We need to make sure that we are giving that information, especially if there's content that they're going to need to work with. Translation is an interesting place to go, though. We don't want to translate everything to the point where there is no opportunity to work with another language that they'll be expected to work on. We're not going to be doing something in place of it, but we are going to be providing those scaffolds and those structures to actually help. So you're going to need to decide, again, there's so many frameworks, but again, Matt Miller has some things to consider, just places where, of course, we know we're going to be enhancing our instruction. We're not replacing the things that we need to do in terms of building our relationships. Or you could decide on the problem first framework. These are some different places that you might decide that you would want to consider one or other. There's plenty of others that are here as well. But again, we have to ground everything in understanding our why and our purpose before we move into anything, whether we're talking about social emotional learning or anything else. So, we're going to be checking out some different places, things that we can do to check in with our students. And obviously, we're going to balance this along with our actual in person relationships, talking about some of the content creation and places that can be libraries for you to do just that. Looking at some tools and resources that already exist, again, as starting points, not as a place that you would use in place of any interaction or relationship with students. And then really just making sure, again, that we are always working with best practice. Okay, so we will go ahead and get into these in just a second. I just want to make sure again that if there are any questions first, since I can't see the chat first, to see if there's anybody that needed anything before we start to jump in. All right, if we
Can
are
I
good,
just
I
ask a
will go
quick
back in.
question?
Oh,
Sorry.
sure. Please go ahead.
When you have those different models, like the castle framework or the trauma informed, my wondering is, you said using one or another, would there be a case where you'd somehow use all of them, or when you're
Definitely.
prompting, or okay.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. It's not an either or in certain situations. And truly, if you're trying to honor everything that could be impacting a student. So if I'm going to be using the Castle framework, but I know I need the trauma informed for certain parts of my audience and my student body, definitely. I don't think there's a limit. The most important thing you want to do is, again, what is your why? Starting with that idea of why am I utilizing this framework? And most of the time, it's because your district or company has a vision of what they're going to be using. I know there is a district in Pennsylvania that's not allowed to use the Castle framework. So we have to talk to them about possibly restorative practices or other places that they could actually turn to. I think the most important thing is we just don't want to do it off the top of our head. We always want to make sure that we're grounding it in what is actually going to be common language for all of our staff or all of our district. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Does anybody else have a question before we move on? And again, feel comfortable interrupting me because once my screen is shared with my presentation, I don't see you. That's why I'm taking the breaks in between. So I'm not going to ignore you if you have something you want to share. All right, so let's go ahead back. And this is when we're actually going to get into, besides the examples that I showed you before, this is a place where we can go ahead and really get the opportunity to work with a ton of different resources. There are many different links here. Because of time today, we're not going to get into all of them, but you are more than welcome to check them out. If there are some that are related to Instagram that you're not able to get to, it's simply to have an Instagram account. But like I said, those we're not going to go to everything today. So, one of the areas we said there's four areas we're going to check out. One of them would be those ideas of check ins. And if we think way back to COVID, the idea of having to do those virtual check ins was something that we did to try to keep ourselves connected. But we also know that we can't clone ourselves. And if we have a group of 30 students, I can't check in and do that 5 for 10 where I'm checking with every single student to see how they're doing at every moment. I'm going to be able to observe their body language. I want to make sure I'm always interacting with them, but I need to make sure also I give them another way to share different things that they're a part of too, and also their interests. So this should be making you make a copy. This document just came from the idea of a seventh grader that really, really loves anime. And because they love anime so much, I already know I'm going to need a jumping off point to get them to care, to get them to engage, to get them to get hooked. It doesn't always have to be about the content because if I make them feel safe and I know that they know I trust them, then I can actually get to that point where I feel that I'm going to be accomplishing things, whether it's content or just having that relationship with that student. So this particular one, I would actually put into the format of the choice board. But if this student loves anime, there's all kinds of different activities. I obviously wouldn't let them do everything all at once, but say, you know what, after you get a chance to work with this academic task, why don't you pick one of those activities? And giving them this over time gives them all kinds of opportunities to try that out. So again, prompting GenAI to go ahead and create something that's based on my students' interest and give them that opportunity to feel wanted and listened to. I know in the past I would give different student surveys or interest inventories in the beginning of the year. I would get back to some of those interests. I wouldn't get to all of them. I feel like this is a way where I really could make sure that I front load, I have those prompts and those ideas already ready to go when I first get to meet my students and take it throughout the entire year. Another place to go is those academic perspectives. This is a place where we're going to go into the AI for Education prompt library. And all of us get frustrated. That's kind of a given. But the whole idea here is if we think about lessons that we know for a fact because of different levels, because of IEP needs or accommodations or modifications, I don't ever want that student to get to that frustrational level simply because I put that counterproductive struggle in the mix. So instead, I can go into the AI for Education prompt library. I can go into a section that's literally for SEL, just SEL prompts in general. So you can definitely check that out another time, hopefully not while I'm presenting. And modifying an existing lesson to accommodate frustration means I could go into ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, any of those frontier large language models. I could literally copy and paste this prompt, taking out anything that isn't going to actually be about my particular class, grade level, or department level. And then I can go ahead and put this right into any of those large language models to get some ideas. This again is where, as you pointed out, I can use more than one SEL framework, but this gives me the chance to actually just frame what I'm looking for first, change it into what I want to share. And as always, we're always going to iterate and continue to talk about those ideas. Okay, and I'm going to keep sharing my screen, but if there are any questions about those two ideas. All right, so in just a minute, when I get to the next slide, if you would be interested in going ahead and trying that out, you can always back up to that slide and go ahead and work with the academics perspectives. Try something out of your own in one of the, like a ChatGPT or another large language model, and go ahead and check that out. Okay, so if you would want to do that instead, that's fine. The next place I'm going to be going is thinking about the idea of when I'm thinking of content creation, and I've got to really make sure I've got mindful lessons. I'm going to go back into that prompt library for just a minute. And this, I can use the chatbot idea, but just like we were pointed out this morning, this could be a jumping out off point when we're talking about the keynote. This is not where we want to live, but this does give us an idea of you are an expert educator and social emotional learning instructional designer with expertise in mindful practices. And in this case, they have the Castle framework. We want to know about strategies to help my students cope with stress and anxiety. So I could create this as an elementary framework, as a middle school framework, as a high school framework, or really drill down to my specific students in my specific class. Again, additional prompting strategies, please always make sure to continue to have that iteration process, just like in design learning, so that you really get that opportunity to get to know more. If you would not want to use that particular one, I just want to show you where these are housed in the AI for Education prompt library. You would go to social emotional learning, and you can see a lot of different concepts that are here. So I'm going to get out of your way in just a few minutes after I give you one more example of some things. And then you're going to decide which slide do you want to kind of live on for a few minutes to actually experiment with and check out those ideas. So I will get out of your way in just a minute. All right, so the last place that I'm going to be sharing this, I do have other things too, but like I said, I want you to have a few minutes to explore. That prompt library link is right here, but Goblin tools are a great place to go for our neurodivergent students, or truly anytime we need to break things apart. There is so much more to this, but I just want to show you this so you have time to play, and we can go ahead and see if you have any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen and then you'll be able to tell me. So say that there's a student that has to work on anything in school, but I would always start with something that's not school related to just kind of give them that sense again, bring down the risk level. So if I have to clean my room, and that's going to be the thing I have to do. So think about something that I can say to students sometimes. Go ahead and clean the room. Some students will just start to pick things up, organize their things right away. Other kids will say, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. So here, I'm going to go ahead and break down the item. And because I picked the idea of how much do I want to break it down, I want to break it down a lot or a little bit. The spiciness level is going to help me decide. So I have to start by gathering all my necessary supplies. I don't know what that means. And that's where sometimes kids are just going to stop and not do what they need to do. All right, so let me just break down this one step. Oh, so gathering this necessary cleaning supplies means these things. So if all I would give a student when they're starting a project is just the first step, once you get that first step done, we're going to come back together. Then we'll go to the next step, maybe the next day. There's other students that only need a few. So I'm going to change my spiciness level because I know they might not need as many things broken down. So what I would like you to do in the next couple minutes is either look at 12, 13, or 14. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, even though you can't see my camera. We'll go ahead and on either 12, 13, or 14, pick an activity. Please do not try all of them at once. Pick one that really spoke to you as I was starting to share, and just start to think about that idea. Just play for a few minutes. I know we don't have a ton of time, but maybe like the next 2 or 3 minutes, at least just start something that you could have a tab open for another time, or know that's a place you'd like to come back to and ask any questions while you're exploring. So just like about 3 minutes, and then I'll start again. And I apologize for my camera not working right now. I don't know why it's doing that. All right, I know it's not enough time, but just one more minute to just start that exploration. All right, so I hate to interrupt if you're already diving into another resource. Again, keep that tab open for another time for sure. Also, my information will be available, so we could just get back together again, whether it's LinkedIn, my email, whatever you would like to do, because like I said, this is something that we can work together on for sure. All right, I'm going to share the last couple of slides, but then ideally we'll have some time for questions. If no questions come up, I'm totally fine with you exploring a little bit more. So either way, we are good to go. So let me go ahead and share. And we'll go ahead and do this. All right, so the things that we talked about, again, I did not go into detail about the ones that are underneath. I apologize. These are actually spaces that are in School AI. And School AI will give you the opportunity to work with different spaces that are safe for students in K to 12, where the information does not go out to train a large language model. I understand, again, this is a place to start. This is not a place to live. The other thing is, if you would choose to interact with any of those spaces, I'm going to leave them open for about a week. So you would be welcome to, just to see how that's organized. It could either be voice activated or it could be typing. I also would try to break the bot and say like IDK, I don't care, this is stupid, just see how it redirects. But these are all specifically social emotional activities, not content related. The most time I would have any student interacting with these is 5 to 10 minutes at a time, simply because, again, keeping humans in the loop, it wouldn't make sense to spend all of our time there, but keeping it open would give them that opportunity to work with them another time. So if you want to talk more about those another time, we definitely can. All right, so the next slide's basically just going to remind us about some things that are here. If you wanted to check out these practical examples, these are examples I have on an infographic in Canva with different things, building stamina, role playing, restorative practices, different pieces that all of our students need. So you're more than welcome to check that out and make a copy if you want. Some things we also need to keep in mind, though, is it's great that we're moving forward with things, but we also always need to make sure that we're aware of things that have been happening, just like they talked about when we first started the conference this morning, keeping these things in mind. And we want to make sure all of our stakeholders and our communities are aware of what's happening, but also being informed ourselves so that we can speak to what is good, what is ethical, what's responsible and effective, but also what we need to be aware of, which is being a critical consumer. And that's why AI literacy is so necessary for all of us. If you have time sometime, I joined PlayLab for their September cohort, and this is a great place to go where it is specifically built for new teachers to work with the Charlotte Danielson model for domains 1 and 2. I have another one for 3 and 4. Just another way to use this in the background, but always making sure that you would work with your mentor, you would work with your department. This would just give you a place to check out some other things as well. So we won't really have much time to unplug right now, but if you need this later on, please feel free to go ahead and work with it anytime. Definitely an ocean idea. And again, my information is right here, and I think that's in the way. So that's the information, like I said, about contacting me. But the more important thing is all of us working together to just think about what we can do to make things better for ourselves, but to honor our kids and our adults as well. Okay, do you have any other questions for me? I know we have literally a minute.
Hi, Samantha.
Hi.
I just want to thank you for this incredibly dense in a beautiful way amount of information. Um, I don't know if you went to the other SEL session this morning or the keynote, but there's this beautiful through line and cacophony of opinions and perspectives. And I would just love to talk to you more, especially about these ideas at scale. Like as we think about teacher burnout, I'm working with iCivics right now, and so civics teachers are facing a lot of challenges. My mind is just exploding with the possibilities for how we might support them. So
that's amazing. Yes, no, I really appreciate it, and I think that's the thing. This started as a place where for women in AI and ED. I just was, starting to put some things together, and then it just started to explode into, as you just said, that balance. Like, where are we and where are we going? But where can we go together? Because we've got to honor that, and the teacher shortage and burnout and everything else is real. So I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely reach out to me anytime.